Hello world, my name is Daniel Marty Elkins and you are watching Talk About It, a show in which we talk about the opioid epidemic. We interview members of the community from a wide variety of backgrounds in order to get as many perspectives as possible on this situation. I'm here today with Captain Jonathan Rhodes. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for welcoming me.
So, just to give a little bit of background about yourself, could you introduce yourself to our audience and let them know who you are and what you do for a living and a profession?
Absolutely. My name is Jonathan Matthew James Rhodes. On the military side, I am a captain, the commander for the 233rd Quartermaster Company located in Horsham, Pennsylvania. On my civilian side, I am the Substance Abuse Block Grant Program Manager for the state of Delaware under our illustrious leader, Shelley Lazarchak.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and we appreciate you being here and sharing your perspective. So, can you give a little bit about your background? How did you get into the current field of prevention? What's your history, and how did you end up doing what you do today?
Well, thing is, it started when I was a young man. My dad always told me, growing up, is that everything you do, you should always plan, and part of those plans, you must always put preventative actions in. So, in order for you to navigate in this world, in order to stay out of trouble, in order to be successful, you should always put in some type of prevention so that you can set yourself on a correct azimuth to go north, to go the right way. So, with that, because he was a military man. He was a Vietnam Korean vet, and unfortunately, he passed away because of the Agent Orange in 2008. His lungs were so. Before he passed, he always told me that one day he wanted me to always give back to the community. He was a strong believer in either, giving back civilly or in the military. Because the community always help you out as long as you are helping the community. You know, so with him teaching me these skills and learning how to navigate through the world, I want to do that for young kids. Um, Growing up in Maryland as well as Dover, Delaware, I seen a lot of things. And as I became a man, I always wanted to be that protector. But a true protector is a person that want to do prevention. If you're there before something starts, that's the best resolution you can ever have. So once I joined the military, I noticed that they had different programs. They had sexual harassment, assault prevention, they had suicide prevention, and they also had the substance abuse prevention. And I said, well, since I'm in the military and since this is free training for me, let me go into it. So that's where, my love for prevention actually started, but I didn't really know until I became a safety officer for the Delaware Army National Guard. And I was a junior officer, and my job was to assess risk. Anything that happened, I would assess the needs of our unit, assess any accidents that happen, bring that data back, and be able to potentially, put in preventive measures to prevent any of those things that happen again.
So, speaking of assessing risks,
Mm-hmm.
and that is something you've got a training and a background in, it is an understatement to say that our nation and this world is at risk from the opioid
Absolutely.
epidemic. Just last year in 2022, there were 110,236
Mm-hmm.
opioid deaths nationwide, and here in Delaware, that was 530 confirmed opioid deaths just last year, as opposed to in 2021, which it was 80,411, and then here in Delaware, we're 515. So with that being a risk, and with your background in sort of assessment of risks, how can we, as a community, find resources or make use of resources that perhaps the state has available in order to address this risk within our communities?
Okay. Well, one of the things that we always talk about is you have to educate.
Mm-hmm.
In order to know, you must be educated on something, or if in order for your community to know, you must educate them. Identify what the risks are, identify the needs, and then educate them on what to do in order to mitigate.
Mm-hmm.
And once you're able to disseminate this information properly and strategically, and make sure there's clarity, because you can give out a bunch of resources, but it's the resources that are effective.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing is the state, the nation, many states have different resources, a lot of resources, but you have to be able to identify the risk and add that correct resources to it. So, for example, those numbers you gave me, we know we have a opioid problem,
Mm-hmm.
correct? Mm-hmm. What we need is leaders within the community, okay, so get out of their silos,
Mm-hmm.
start identifying what's really going on, still speak and give that information to the state or to their organizations that govern that state. Sit down and say, hey, this is what we should do. You don't always complain. I'm a strong believer in being pragmatic. Don't be problematic, but be pragmatic. So identify the problem,
Mm-hmm.
give solutions, course of actions, find the best course of actions, and then execute,
Mm-hmm.
and then build your coalition around it.
So, to give our viewers a little bit of more context, can you tell them what is the Substance Abuse Block Grant, and what does it do here in the state of Delaware?
Absolutely. All right. The Substance Abuse Block Grant is on the prevention side. What it does is it feed in monies, funds to programs who are in the community,
Mm-hmm.
that knows the community,
Mm-hmm.
or are supposed to know the community.
Mm-hmm.
And they're supposed to enable that program to produce prevention
Mm-hmm.
around substance abuse. All right. The Substance Abuse Block Grant also enables programs to build coalitions,
Mm-hmm.
also enables them to build groups so that they can be able to assess the needs, so that they can bring it back to the state. And while assessing needs, giving us different solutions to execute properly, because we don't want history to repeat itself. So we have, instead of being reactive, we have to be proactive.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what the SABG in a nutshell what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the organizations that you work with, I'm familiar with some, but for instance, there are a wide variety of different organizations. For instance, Courageous Hearts,
Mm-hmm.
that's an organization that
Mm-hmm.
is new to the Block Grant.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell our viewers just a little bit about what they do, just to give the broad scope of the type of work that Block Grant organizations do?
Okay, well, for example, with Courageous Hearts,
Mm-hmm.
they utilize equine.
Mm-hmm.
They execute equine therapy in order to produce prevention within the community. They're well known down in Rehoboth.
Mm-hmm.
They're well known down in Milford, into those areas. So their belief system is to bring the children,
Mm-hmm.
okay, who are not diagnosed with such
Mm-hmm.
substance abuse disorder,
Mm-hmm.
teach them emotional regulation, teach them, social regulation,
Mm-hmm.
and to teach them the skills to navigate in the world that has a lot of stressors.
Mm-hmm.
Identify the stressors, because usually, if those stressors are not identified and properly taken care of,
Mm-hmm.
they might potentially put them in the wrong path of substance abuse, suicidal ideations, and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just a nutshell for a courageous order.
So it's a wide
Mm-hmm.
variety of organizations that are sort of funded from federal dollars that come through the
Mm-hmm.
state
Mm-hmm.
level. That is there an overarching strategy that you guys use in order to help identify what type of intervention should be done?
Absolutely. So one of those are the CSAP strategies,
Mm-hmm.
and we utilize the SPIF model.
And CSAP is the Center for Substance Abuse
Mm-hmm.
Prevention, and SPIF is the Strategic Prevention
Yes,
Framework.
it is.
Okay,
Yes, it
just
is.
making sure we
Right
play
there. Yeah,
alphabet soup,
absolutely.
So I
And
want to.
I came from an acronym organization. The military always acronyms.
That's I'm just we're making sure you're with us.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So these are basically the fundamentals of building your organization around.
Mm-hmm.
This is the fundamentals of identifying what you can do in your with your organization within the community properly
Mm-hmm.
and effectively,
Mm-hmm.
and you're executing the gospel of prevention.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what we utilize for the state. When we go and do our monitoring, we say, okay, are they utilizing the CSAT strategies? Are they utilizing the SPIF model?
Mm-hmm.
Because what's so funny is that whole model is similar to the military decision making
Mm-hmm.
process,
Okay.
which is interesting. So the thing is, it teaches you how to make a framework so that you're able to put the needs that you assessed in the community already and find ways to mitigate it
Mm-hmm.
in a more structured fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And so the types of interventions that are sort of looked at, you're dealing with like information
Mm-hmm.
dissemination, you're dealing with
Environmental.
environmental
Mm-hmm.
strategies.
Mm-hmm.
So what is an environmental strategy?
Well, with the environmental strategies, basically you're going into an environment that you think that might have risks,
Mm-hmm.
and you assess it.
Mm-hmm.
You find out what are the environmental stressors or the environmental needs that might be creating these stress factors, that might be
Mm-hmm.
creating these risk factors.
Mm-hmm.
So once you find out the environmental needs or the environmental issues,
Mm-hmm.
you're able to assess it
Mm-hmm.
and identify a proper mechanism to satisfy it.
So an environmental strategy might emerge out of like a sort of a community environmental survey
Mm-hmm.
in which they're looking at the community and potentially identify that there might be an instance where youth in the community are getting pills
Mm-hmm.
from elderly
Or
grandparents.
gummies, or getting gummies from the school, or you have adults selling gummies to them.
Right.
Yeah,
And, and,
absolutely.
and so you identify that from that survey that perhaps that there is a house in the neighborhood
Mm-hmm.
that is doing that, and then you are coming up with a strategy to help
Mm-hmm.
address
Mm-hmm.
that need in the community.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, you could look at a community park in which there's no lights on
Mm-hmm.
during the course of the night, and
Mm-hmm.
then there might be illicit activities that
Mm-hmm.
are happening, and a potential environmental strategy would be working with the county to install maybe lights,
Or put more lights,
pull
add
more
more
lights.
lights. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
Or
uh, so to actually change the environment itself in
mm-hmm.
order to reduce the risk factors and to increase the protective factors. Okay.
Like climate surveys, find a climate of the area that you're in. Make sure you see what the problem is,
Mm-hmm.
was how you can change it, and what is needed.
Mm.
So yeah.
So, of the CSAP strategies that you've been talking about,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think is the most effective?
Oof, I think all of them are effective.
Okay.
But if I would choose, I am a key believer that knowledge is power.
Mm-hmm.
So dissemination, information,
Mm-hmm.
education.
Mm-hmm.
So education is one of the CSAPs. So I would say that education and teaching,
Mm-hmm.
or learning
Yeah.
as well. I think if you're better educated on what's going on, you can produce a clear strategy to disseminate it in your area in order to change or make changes.
Mm. And it's important to ensure that the information that is being disseminated is based on evidence and okay.
Evidence based practices, absolutely.
Excellent. So let's just take a quick a turn for a moment and talk about your service
Mm-hmm.
in the military. It's something that I've often heard from people I know who have served. But can you talk a little bit about people who have perhaps potentially been injured while serving overseas, and then a potential addiction to pain pills coming back? Is that something you had to deal with as a
Mm-hmm.
commander?
Mm-hmm.
And what is the United States military doing about that to help reduce and impact the substance abuse disorder with our veterans?
Well, I'm a strong believer in leadership. I'm a
Mm,
strong believer in, you have to, as a leader, you must know your soldiers.
mm,
You must know your subordinates. You must know your subordinate leaders. So some of the things that I've seen and had to handle were a lot of soldier members who got hurt.
mm,
And of course, unfortunately, they ended up, taking the pills and took too much and got addicted,
mm,
because it could have been, hereditary, or it could have been something
mm,
connected to competition or
mm,
whatever. But what us as leaders, we need to understand how our soldiers tick. Like, you have to know what's the big changes around them. You know, you have to call on them, check on them. You know, some leaders you have, am I saying just military leaders, but leaders in a lot of big organizations, they tend to stay on a high horse. And when you're on a high horse, you don't know what's going on below you. Sometimes you have to get off your high horse and walk the walk and talk to your soldiers, because if you talk to your soldiers, you might save one. So some of the things that you know, the military has been doing is the preventive services. You know, we always have training on substance abuse awareness. We always have training on suicide awareness. We always have training on sexual harassment, assault awareness, things that we know that's a problem because we assess the risks. And you had big money people who were psychologists to identify these things. But it all starts with the leadership. It does. And if any leader do not check on her and be empathetic enough to understand that, hey, they were hurt or they went through some financial problems, they want to find a quick euphorian feeling to feel good. And that's when you have to identify the changes in your soldiers, because they're the ones that work for you. They're the ones that work for this great military. So some of the things that DOD is doing, you know, they had a response to the Senate, and they are putting in places where if you get pills, you're going to be monitored more.
Okay.
Yeah, you're going to be monitored more, because everyone knows, hey, the 800 milligram ibuprofen, you can ask any military person that. They're starting to be more strict with the medications that's being given to our soldiers. And at MEPS, if anybody ever went through the MEP process, which is the military enlistment, which is the basically the entry program before you go to your basic training or AIT. When you go to these places, they're very strict now. They'll look through your medical records. They'll look through your psychology to see if you have any type of risk factors.
A tendency.
Yes, they'll look through that now. And this has been, a lot of recruiters don't like a lot of those doctors there, but they're actually doing their job because they're trying to identify the risk factors and mitigate it and move those soldiers or those applicants away so that they don't potentially hurt themselves and get into that particular situation.
Now,
So,
no, do they make substance abuse counseling available through the VA? Yeah.
Okay, so if the soldier, I know for my unit, I'm in a reserve unit, and one thing I'm very happy about the reserves is that you're going to get bombarded with services because they know that you are a citizen soldier. Once you come back, you're not active duty. You have to then reintegrate back into the real world. The thing is there are many services that you can come to, but because and this is because there's so many people, so many soldiers that need help, we need more counselors. Okay, we have it, but we need to build a capacity because we utilize civilian contractors. And the thing is, now they're seeing that we have a lot of soldiers who we can retain if we only build our mental health, if we only build our help for the soldiers. The thing is we invest in a lot of weapons. We invest in different things, but we need to start investing. I'm talking about as taxpayers, as leaders in the community, we need in the military. We need to start investing back into our soldiers because they're the ones that move the military. So one of the initiatives that me and my first sergeant do, we talk to our soldiers. Number one, we find out, what do they need. If it's financial, because that's a risk factor. Financial, if they are homeless, that's a risk factor. If they lost somebody, that's a risk factor, right? So what we do is, if they have these type of, issues mentally or emotionally, we then identify some resources to give to them. But again, a lot of it is scarce because a lot of people, when you help the military, all right, if you're a civilian and you PhD level, or if you are a license level, LCSW, whatnot, people want to get paid.
Oh, of
I'm
course.
keeping it
Yeah.
real.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you need your lights on.
Yeah.
You need to feed your family. You
Absolutely.
paid a lot of money to get your education.
And
Yeah,
there are a whole lot of qualifications you need in order to be able to do that
exactly.
well. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's hard to find someone who would give that time, for a cheap price to take care. So I know that we have a lot of things that we're paying for and federally for the nation. But I just pray that we identify and know and understand the needs of the veterans because we need those services.
Well, and it comes back to that preventative work.
Exactly, prevention.
And using a way to evaluate what those needs are, similar to the way we do with our communities. And so, in closing, if there were one message that you could get out to the listeners to get them thinking about what maybe they could do in their own lives to help out with prevention in the community, what would that be?
Step up. All right, if you see something, and you hear this all the time, you see something, say something. But if you see something, do something. You have the power, to do anything in this world. We have the power and the knowledge to build metal mechanisms that fly in the sky supersonic. We have the power and the knowledge to build these lights, to build these architects. Why not be the architect of your community and build a solution instead of building problems?
Well, you heard it here first. Thank you very much for being with us
Absolutely.
today.
Thank you.
And keep on talking about it.